Hello, I'm Dr. Bijendra Jha and I will talk about Rights of the Transgender Person Bill 2026, which has been introduced in the Parliament on 30th March. And if you see that there is a huge protest against this bill. Now look at this bill. Before bill, we need to understand who is a transgender person. A transgender person is the person who is different from the sex that is assigned at the birth, right? So look at the transgender person, their population according to 2011 census, their population is approximately 4,87,803, right? And worldwide, if you look at transgender person, 1% of the world constitute transgender person. Now they were the most marginalized, oppressed, exploited community in India, and they fought a long struggle, long battle for the recognition of their rights. Right? In this discourse, if you look at Nalsa versus Union of India case, 2014, Supreme Court has given identity, autonomy to the transgender person. And if you look at, you know, the court has held that the transgender person is facing problem, the social recognition, right, political recognition as well as legal recognition, they are lacking, right? Now if you look at before this Nalsa judgment given by the Supreme Court, the Parliament has introduced a private member bill in 2010. Now this bill, that bill was very much comprehensive. Now meanwhile there was a movement by the transgender person in different part of India, right? And consequently, you have transgender Nalsa versus Union of India case 2014. Now, this judgment has actually given right to describe autonomy and identity. Now, the Supreme Court held that the transgender person can self-prescribe their identity, and there is no need of medical certification, right? Now, later on, if you look at the government passed Right of the Transgender Person Act 2019, which has given right to the transgender person to describe their identity. Now look at the few basic elements of the Rights of the Transgender Person Act 2019. Now if you look at Rights of the Transgender Person 2019, right, that basically had given a wider definition of the transgender person. Now look at the Act 2019 held that, right, a person with socio-cultural identity such as Kinnar, Hejra, Aravani, Jogta, right, they are called transgender person, or a person with variation at birth in the characteristics such as primary sexual characteristics, external genitalia, chromosomes, right, hormones from the normative standards of the male or female body. So this is basically definition given by the act, right? Now look at the bill, the Transgender Person Bill 2026, removes the following categories from the transgender. Now what are that? A trans man or trans woman, right, irrespective of whether such a person has undergone sex reassignment surgery, hormone therapy or laser therapy or such other therapy, and gender queer. So this kinds of person has been excluded from the transgender person category, right? Now look at this bill further what includes. Now this bill includes another category called enunch, right, or a person who is forced to assume a transgender person identity by mutilation, emasculation, castration, surgical or chemical or hormonal procedures. So this has been included, right, as a identity of the transgender person, but it has also excluded something. Now, if you look at the under the act, you know, the transgender person used to get certificate of the transgender person by the district magistrate without going medical certification. Now the new bill has actually included this procedures, that if a person wants to get certificate of transgender person, that person has to basically go under the medical examination, and that will be held by the medical board headed by medical chief medical officer or deputy chief medical officer. Now after this examination, the district magistrate will issue a certificate. Now this is the clause that is more controversial, right? Now if you look at the Nalsa versus Union of India case, right, that was providing very much very much you know the Nalsa judgment 2014, that was provided self identity of the transgender person, but that has been actually withdrawing from the transgender community by the state by introducing transgender person bill 2026. Now look at the government, other government initiatives, right? As we have already discussed, what is the problem with this bill? Now look at the government initiatives. The government has one big initiative called Smile. It's a scheme, right? Now this Smile is a big scheme for transgender person, and basically it provides a very broader mechanism for livelihood and enterprise of the transgender community, and it also has provision for rehabilitation and welfare of the transgender community. Now if you look at, this is umbrella schemes, as I told you, right, and that helps in the welfare of the transgender person, right? It gives medical facilities, it provides rehabilitation provision, it gives voluntary organization, community based organization, institution which can involve in the welfare of the transgender persons, right? And it works for the education, rehabilitation, medical care, other welfares for the transgender community, right? And apart from this, if you look at, there's a one body that is called National Council for Transgender Person, right? Transgender person. Now look at this council is a statutory body which works for the welfare of the transgender community. This council has been basically set up in 2021, right? And it gets its statutory status from the National Transgender Person Act 2019, right? So look at the Transgender Person Bill 2026, right? It is a very much regressive, one can say, and that's why transgender person community are rejecting this bill, right? And they have actually set up a date 26 March for the protest against this bill. Thank you so much.